Okay, Cindy.
I'm now going to call this public hearing to order. This is a public hearing for conditional use, to consider conditional use application 2023-0014 for the Toward property, a cluster home land development. In attendance this evening are Supervisors Fisher, Fleer, Barney, as well as Township Solicitor Gretchen Moore and Township Engineer Dan Dizeroth. Please stand if you want to speak. If you intend to speak or think you may speak during the meeting, please stand to be sworn in. Or hearing, I should say, not meeting.
Anybody who's going to comment, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear testimony you're about to give the whole truth and nothing but
So just as a reminder, if you intend to speak, you're going to need to step to the microphone and state your name and address clearly for the record so that the court reporter can get that information. If you want to stand up and start the presentation, just step to the microphone. And again, just state who you are, where you're from, and you can start.
My name's Bill Moldovan, M-O-L-D-O-V-A-N.
It might be easier if you hold the microphone pops out of there if you hold it versus trying to.
Bill Moldovan, M-O-L-D-O-V-A-N, with Kimley Horn. My address is 750 Holiday Drive, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 15220.
Thank you.
I'm here tonight representing D&M Real Estate, as mentioned, for the Profio Road property cluster housing development conditional use application. I'm going to go through the history of the meetings that we've had with the township to date, and then go through the design, the proposed design for the cluster development. I also have here with me tonight Jeff DePaulis. He's Kimley Horn's traffic engineer. He'll be discussing the traffic engineering component of the application, and then we'll turn it over to any questions. Also here are Ryan Klausnitzer with NVR and Doug Warden representing the developer. The proposed site, it's Washington County Tax Parcel ID number 140-001-0027. It's 75.7 acres, currently zoned R1 low density residential. Per the zoning provisions of the township, the maximum density for the proposed development or proposed site is 151 single-family residential units, and that's using the cluster housing subdivision ordinance provisions. Our development strategy for the project is to construct a community with the required density from a development perspective while maintaining 50% open space across the parcel. This is the site up on the screen right now. In red is the 75-acre parcel. To the page top or north is King Road, and to the south is Profio Road. Our development team came to the May 2023 Planning Commission meeting. We made a presentation of the project team and the development description. We listened to and heard the concerns of the township and the public. Some of those concerns were ownership of the open space, which is going to be owned and maintained by a homeowners association, the traffic distribution and counts. We did collect counts on both Profio Road and King Road during the school year. We had a submitted traffic report that was revised to include those traffic counts and traffic distribution. Site distance at the Profio Road entrance was a concern. We conducted site distance measurements, and it was deemed adequate site distance proposed for the development. There was also concern about the sewage flows. We clarified the sewage alignment on the plans, and we've also been in contact with Midway Sewage Authority to coordinate and communicate our proposed development plans and strategies. A trail, which is being proposed as part of the plan, was not initially shown on our submitted documents. We've since revised our plans to show the trail alignment. Roadway improvements were a concern. We have met with the township, Public Works, as well as the township engineer in the field, and I'll provide a summary of that meeting at the end of the presentation. There was also a concern about cluster mailbox, where that would be located. Ryan Klausnitzer of NVR has talked with the McDonald Post Office, and they are ready to work with us to develop a location that suits their needs and the needs of the proposed residents. We came back in June of 2023, made a presentation of the revised plan at that meeting, in which the Planning Commission recommended that the Board of Supervisors schedule this public hearing. Just quickly to go through the cluster development steps in the ordinance provisions. There's a step-by-step process to come to a point where you have a plan that meets the cluster development provisions. Step one is simply to determine the maximum density. And as I stated earlier, it's 151 units. Step two is to put together an existing features and site analysis plan, and that's what this is representing. There are steep slopes identified, approximate stream center lines identified, overhead electric, existing lines that are identified on the plan. And step three was to take that existing condition plan and identify conservation areas. So, looking at maintaining existing vegetation, obviously avoiding impacts to existing streams on the site, and avoiding to the extent possible steep slopes. So this plan begins to identify those natural features for conservation, as well as start to lay in a potential roadway alignment throughout the site. Step four is to locate houses along the alignment and start to develop corridors for trails. So these small squares represent the 101 proposed units on the site. The dark lines are road center lines, and then there's a hatched line that runs through the property that identifies proposed potential trail alignments. And then step five is to develop lot lines associated with the plan. And you can see here we've carved out a public road right-of-way, and we've got a connection to Profio Road, also one connection to King Road, and then it circulates throughout the site. And part of the cluster development provisions is to maintain existing vegetation between the clusters of housing units, and we believe that this layout does in fact do that in a manner that's going to separate these pockets of proposed housing. And then after the conceptual layouts were complete, we went ahead and did a little bit more detailed engineering, showed locations of proposed stormwater ponds, extensive cut and fill grading, and actual lot lines on the site to make sure that they fit within the ordinance provisions and still maintained the required setback around the entire parcel that's a provision of the cluster development ordinance. So that setback is maintained. It will not be impacted. It will be in its existing condition, and none of the proposed lots encroach on that setback. The green line that's shown on this plan indicates a preliminary layout of a proposed pedestrian circulation or trail alignment. You see it kind of zigzags back and forth, and that's because we do have a significant amount of elevation change, and we're looking at making an alignment that serpentines or switchbacks to allow it to be accessible. And this is just a rendering of that proposed layout. So you can see in these locations that we've got that existing vegetation that we're proposing to maintain that will provide separation from this roadway alignment and this cluster of homes and the cluster of homes to the right or above. Just a summary of the sanitary sewage conversations that we've had with Midway Sewage Authority. In January 2023, NVR and the developer had a conversation, presented the plan, and again in July, this past month, Kimberly Horn has had conversations with David Acoch. He's the plant manager. We expressed the fact that the township had asked that we be prepared to discuss that with the Board of Supervisors tonight, the communications that we've had. We've asked David to provide a letter that states that he understands what our proposed scheme is, which is individually owned grinder pumps on each lot and a force main, which would be public within the road right-of-way. He was hoping to have a letter to us last Thursday. We communicated with him again today. The authority's engineer hasn't been in the office. He expects to have that letter to us sometime this week. But in none of the communications, and we've been absolutely transparent and forthright with him about our intent, has he expressed any concern with our proposed concept. And then I'm going to call up Jeff DePaulis, who's going to talk about the traffic engineering work that's been done in association with the application.
Would you rather, so I do have a couple questions related to like lot size and things like that. Would you rather us hold them to the end and ask you everything at end before we move on to traffic, or from a board perspective, or would you rather ask as we go along?
Can we hold it until the end, and I'll be prepared to answer?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. As Bill said, my name is Jeff DePaulis, D-E-P-A-O-L-I-S. I'm a professional traffic operations engineer and a registered professional engineer in Pennsylvania. I work for Kimberly Horn, 750 Holiday Drive, Pittsburgh, 15220. As Bill had kind of indicated to earlier, we had originally just submitted a traffic impact statement back with our May submission that talked about just a trip generation comparison. On here you can see the 101 units that are proposed would generate 1,018 trips per day. That's 509 cars in, 509 cars out. The peak of that would occur during the evening rush, as you may anticipate, when 100 trips would be generated, and that would be 63 entering and 37 exiting. Since the township has no thresholds actually published for traffic impact studies, we took a look at PennDOT's thresholds, as some municipalities default to those. PennDOT's thresholds for a traffic study are typically 3,000 trips a day, or 100 trips entering, or 100 trips exiting during a peak hour. So the proposed development at 1,018 trips and 100 total PM peak hour trips would not meet PennDOT warrants for a traffic study. We did go out and take a look at the roadway conditions. You can see here, this is where the site driveway would be located. Looking to the east, you have sufficient site distance. Looking to the west, even more site distance, and the road is approximately 16 feet wide. We also took a look at Profio Road. This is looking to the east or to the right from the site driveway. This is where everyone had the concern, as there is a breakover curve located right here. This is Profio Road looking to the left or to the west. Obviously more site distance here, and Profio Road in this area is approximately 18.5 feet wide. So we took our original traffic study based on the feedback we got at the May meeting and revised it to include some additional information and submitted that on June 12th. First thing we did was we went out and did some traffic counts. As Bill indicated, one of the things that was very important at that time was to make sure they were done while school was still in session, and we did actually get the counts done before school ended for the year. And so then we took a look, first of all, at the layout of the site, as Bill showed before, and based on the roadway configuration and the lot configuration, we're going to assume that approximately 75% of the site trips will utilize the driveway to King Road, while the remaining 25 will go out to Profio. And then of the King Road trips, based on the existing traffic volumes that we observed on the roadways, approximately 60% of the traffic during the morning was headed to the east, and then in the afternoon coming back was heading from the east to the west. So we're assuming approximately 60% of the traffic from the development is going to want to head that way and head out King Road. The other 15% would head to the left or to the west on King Road and out towards Profio. And then of the traffic that would go out to Profio, the 25%, we had about 5% that would turn right there and head up towards King Road, with the remaining 20% heading south on Profio itself. So it's about 60-40-40 distribution, or 60-20-20, excuse me, with 60% to and from on King, 20% to and from the north on Profio, and 20% to and from the south on Profio. Then, as Bill indicated, the other big issue that was brought up was the site distance at the driveway to Profio Road. The posted speed limit of Profio is 25 miles an hour. We took a look at the actual grades in that area. Speak up? Yeah. Oh, wow, okay. Normally I'm told to be quiet, but the posted speed on Profio Road is 25 miles per hour. The existing roadway grades that we measured in the field, approaching from the left, is a downhill at approximately -2%. Coming from the right is an uphill of about 1.3%. Based on the township and PennDOT criteria, the required site distance looking to the left is 150 feet, and looking to the right towards the crest vertical curve is 145 feet. Those are the required distances. Based on our measurements, we observed approximately 335 feet, or over 2 times the amount of required site distance, an extra almost 200 feet of site distance looking left. And then towards the crest vertical curve, we had approximately 220 feet of site distance, and again, that was required is only 145, so we do have approximately 75 feet of additional site distance looking to the right. This is just a graphic that was put together to show, again, heading out of the development and coming down Profio, we had approximately 20% of the traffic. Heading out King, approximately 60%, and then heading north, another 20%. So that was the traffic results. I'll give it back to Bill to finish up on the field meeting, and then I'll be available for questions afterwards as well.
And this slide is simply a summary of the field meeting that occurred on June 8th. It was with the township engineer, and Public Works, as well as the developer team. We looked at roadway conditions, reviewed reasonable improvements, And the township engineer is actively preparing a cost estimate for improvements, and the developer and NVR are both amenable to reasonable impact fees for those improvements. That concludes our presentation. Both Jeff, myself, and the development team are here to answer any questions.
So you mentioned there were 101 lots. What's the lot size?
The lot size is 1/4 acre.
So if you want to flip back to the map showing your, just looking at briefly your map and the definition of a cluster, to me this looks like a PRD, not like a cluster development. And we had, I don't know if you're aware of it, but there's a plan at the end of Rising that initially tried to do something similar and came before this board and tried to say they were a cluster development to avoid rezoning, and they were not in fact a cluster development. Look, this is my opinion, but if you flip to the one where you show where the trees are, this cluster developments were meant to be clusters of homes. Just because you put trees between streets that are all connecting doesn't make it a cluster development. So again, my opinion, but it feels a little bit like you're trying to pass off a PRD as a cluster to avoid a rezoning, especially at 1/4 acre, a lot size.
And we did, prior to coming to the township with an application, we met with the township and the township engineer with an original plan that did not create these what we view as clusters, separated by undeveloped land, and we did revise that plan to be something that we considered a cluster of development, and that we felt comfortable that the township would consider a cluster development. So I do understand where you may think that it fits more into the PRD, but we do believe that we meet the intent of the cluster development by creating these pockets of developed area. And connected by a spine road, that we would need a road to connect the clusters to the proposed
There's
intersections.
There's no breakage in the homes. Like, I live in a PRD. We have PRDs all throughout the township. The difference between a PRD and a cluster development is these are just 1/4 acre houses strung together on streets. Sure, you have trees in them. We have trees everywhere in all of our neighborhoods. We require open space to be there. But again, at first glance to me, this appears to be our PRD that you're trying to push as a cluster development in order to avoid a rezoning. Is the primary entrance on King or Profio?
Profio would be the primary entrance, just based on the trip distribution. I'm sorry, King would be. I apologize, King based on trip distribution, but I don't know that the developer has determined whether one would be primary or not. It would just be based on the distribution of where people are going. So King would be the more appropriate answer, but there's going to be no difference in the design of the entrance points.
So are you aware to exit King, so to head towards Bridgeville or Route 50 or anywhere on this side of the township, you have to take King to Rising, and then Rising under a very sharp turn, through a railroad trestle that doesn't have great sight distance onto Route 50, where you have to cross 4 lanes of traffic to make a left-hand turn into Bridgeville.
Yes, I'm familiar with the route.
So when you did your traffic study, was Silver Creek, which is the Miranda plan at the end of Rising that's recently been approved, factored in when you said that no traffic improvements were needed?
No, there was no consideration to another plan to determine whether traffic improvements were needed. But we met with the township to understand what traffic improvements the township thought would be needed.
Okay, so,
Something's gonna have to be done down on 50.
yeah, so, again, you didn't meet with us. This is the first time we're hearing this. So you keep saying you met with the township. You may have. But at the end of the day, this board is responsible for approving the plan, and we're asking you and saying that, I can only speak for myself, although I feel very confident in saying, I think my board members will agree with me, that there is serious concern. There's 350 or so homes already approved in Silver Creek. There is serious concern on the part of this board about the ability of King and Rising Road to handle the amount of traffic that's going to come from that housing plan. We put a significant impact fee on that housing plan, let alone the turnpike exits off there onto Rising and comes under that. To add this, which again, I believe is a PRD, not a cluster, is seriously concerning to me.
How much did you look at Rising Road? Rising Road is a bad road. It's very narrow.
I'm going to let Jeff answer.
Well, I think the key answer to your question is we didn't look at Rising. We looked at King and we looked at Profio because we were told, come up with a distribution as to which way you think traffic's going to be going. And all the development in this area is residential. So based on what we saw in the field, we just assumed it was going to follow the same pattern. And the majority of the traffic that we saw out there is not on Profio Road, it's on King Road. And a majority of that traffic
That's exactly
is
what I'm
headed-
saying. And you want to dump it all on Rising Road, which is a very bad road. It's very narrow. It's in bad shape.
So is Profio.
And again, we understand that, but at the same time,
But ask that you not yell out from the audience. Like, you will have the opportunity to speak, but please don't yell out from the audience.
this is a single-family residential development. I know over the course of a day, 1,000 trips, but during peak periods, it's a very low generator. We're talking about 65 trips coming home and 35 going out in the afternoon, and of that, 60% of that, so roughly 40 and 20 trips headed.
And probably
towards
every one of
outlets.
them houses, 80% of them have 2 vehicles.
And the argument that I always use in that case is, yes, but they don't all come and leave at the same time. I leave for work at 6:45 in the morning. My wife doesn't leave for work until 8:45, so there's a 2-hour separation.
That's you. That's not everybody.
But I'm just saying, that's why it's a peak hour. That's not, everybody doesn't come and go at the same time.
It's still the amount of impacts, though. Like, yes, I would agree with you that not every car is going to pull out of their driveway at the exact same time. That doesn't mean that there isn't a consideration for the additional traffic that you're putting on, to Supervisor Fleer and Supervisor Barney's point, roads that are already in significant disrepair. One of which would be Rising Road, which is a state road that we have no control over. We've been asking, begging, pleading for the state to improve Rising, and they refuse to do it for whatever reason. So you're asking us to approve a plan that will now dump an additional 100-plus homes worth of cars onto a road that we already know is in disrepair, under an underpass that we already know has really poor sight distance, onto Route 50 across 4 lanes of traffic. Like, and you're trying, again, I'm not trying to harp on this, but I really strongly disagree that this is a cluster development. Cluster developments, to me, are large parcels, maybe an acre, you know, in clumps of land where, yes, you have a road connector, but you're not lining acreage up, like lining houses up on quarter acres. This is a PRD, not a cluster.
We're following the ordinance provisions in terms of the minimum lot size for a cluster housing development. That's, we're not asking for any special consideration from the published and adopted zoning provisions. And in terms of coordinating with the Board of Supervisors in regards to improvements, I don't want to come across as a developer team that is not willing to work with the township and the Board of Supervisors regarding improvements, reasonable improvements. So I don't want you to feel like we're being, like we wouldn't work with you to understand what those improvements need to be and how we can contribute reasonably.
What would you consider a reasonable contribution?
It depends what the cost of the improvements are and whether or not we believe that we would be significantly impacting the need for those improvements. And I believe that's a discussion with the Board of Supervisors, and I think we have shown that we're amenable to communicating, coordinating, and contributing to any improvements that, and I use the word reasonable because it's in
Well,
your
once
ordinance.
again, what you're saying is what Cindy just said. You haven't talked to us.
I-
This is the first time, you said you're talking to the supervisor. You haven't talked to us.
And all we can do until this point is talk to the people within the township that we were going through the process, which is going to the Planning Commission, asking that they provide a positive recommendation to set a public hearing to get to this point. So I don't want to come off as us, not being willing to work with the township on any reasonable improvements.
Something just sits wrong with me,
Half-acre lots.
because again, not
Half-acre
trying to harp on it, but this is a PRD. Like, I understand you're saying it meets the overall criteria. I can't speak one way, or not. I have some of them in front of me, I don't have all of them. But you're trying to say, like, part of the cluster development criteria is no more than 2 dwelling units per acre. Yes, overall you meet that, but if you actually look at the acreage that you're using, because some of it's, a significant portion of the acreage you can't use because of the topography of it. So to me, if you're looking at the acreage you're actually using, you're exceeding that 2 dwelling units per acre. The purpose of the cluster development definition was to try to make this different than a PRD, was to try to make it larger lots, more spread out, more spacious. Just because you have 76 acres and only, say, 30 of them are developable, doesn't mean that this fits the definition of a cluster development. You see what I'm saying? You're trying to say that because you lop off this side of it and you lop off this side of it because it's too steep or you couldn't actually develop it, that somehow that counts into the acreage. I get it, it's 76 point whatever acres, but if you look at the house, where the houses sit, they don't sit on 76 acres. They sit on 30 acres. And on 30 acres, you actually probably have 4 to 5 dwelling units per acre based on that.
I would argue that the ordinance provisions have been followed in this particular layout, maintaining 50% open space, having clusters of groups of homes separated by undeveloped and mature trees, both internally and externally to adjacent landowners, and that we do meet the ordinance provisions with the quarter-acre lots.
But Timber Run is a PRD that is literally right next to where you are. Or, that is, the lots are bigger, there is true, you don't have quarter-acre lots. McConnell's Trails has quarter-acre lots, they're this big. What's the one off of Pristine Fields? Bigger lots. Like, that is the purpose of a cluster development, is bigger lots. Again, just because you're jamming them on quarter acres, but it's only 30 acres of land that you're using, doesn't mean, in my reading of the definition of a cluster development, that you're meeting that.
And this is, I realize this is the first time that we've been to the Board of Supervisors, but our intent the entire time was to communicate with the township to understand whether or not we were coming in with a cluster development or a PRD. And until right now, we felt very comfortable that we met the requirements and that this plan represented a cluster development per the ordinance. So I understand your objection to us considering it, but we do believe that we meet the provisions of the cluster development.
Do you have a copy of the section 902, the low-density residential zone?
On me at this point,
Does anybody
no.
have it?
I can pull it up on my phone.
It talks about, in the cluster development section, it says provide flexible development options to preserve existing natural features, including wooded slopes, quality stands of trees, stream valley corridors, wetlands, wildlife habitats, and other natural features, which apparently you do. But it also says provide flexible development options in areas where standard rectilinear developments are not suitable due to physical conditions. So as our chairman was saying about our PRDs, normally they follow the land that they can use. But then it says creating a system of integrated walking and biking trails to connect new developments with natural areas and existing neighborhoods and to encourage alternate means of transportation. Does this plan allow you to do any of that?
Yes, it does. We have a network of off-road trails as well as sidewalks on both sides of the road throughout the development.
But I'm not an expert at reading plans like this, but it just seems like the backyards that abut some open space, it seems like it's all graded property that's really steep. And to me, that's what kind of flies in the face of having backyards abutting a natural piece of, or good piece of wooded property.
And
Am I wrong in that, in reading this way, that it looks like all the backyards, from the edge of the backyards, it's just steep grades?
there's cut and fill slopes, yes, to make it developable.
But I mean, we're always faced with that with PRDs, because they called rectilinear, but they're linear streets. And it says, provide open spaces, areas which will provide the residents with active and passive recreational opportunities and permit some innovative community living projects. I'm just saying, if my yard backs to a steep cut, I mean, it's not accessible to me. And one more, it says, well, no, that's about wastewater treatment. But I just don't see how.
You can't hear him.
That having your yard.
Tom, she's having a hard time. Can you just make sure you're
I'm
talking?
sorry. I just see how anybody would have be able to use that green space. Like I said, we expect it in a PRD. I mean, that's just the nature of it. But a cluster development was supposed to be different, where the green space is usable.
I would argue that within a 2-minute walk from any of these units out their front door, that you would be able to access the proposed trails
But
and
out
use
the back door, it seems like it'd be, I'd have a 2-minute walk down a cliff to get to the green areas.
And I don't think that people would want people that lived in those homes that you're talking about. They wouldn't want to have others using that space directly behind their homes. I think I think what we've proposed allows all of the residents within this proposed subdivision to use that open space, just not right out of their back door.
Where are you saying?
Are
you're
you
saying-
calling the front
hold
sidewalks
on.
trails?
Yeah, you're saying.
I'm saying it's a network of pedestrian movement.
Well, the
Yes.
sidewalks are not trails.
I am not saying that the sidewalks are trails.
You're saying outside
You're saying they
of their
can walk out the front door to the trails.
To get to the trails, yes, they
You
walk
didn't
along.
say that.
You're saying that outside everybody's front door, within 2 minutes, they would get to some sort of outdoor, show me where.
They would get to an intersection of this green path that comes throughout the entire development. These are steep slopes. They're wooded areas that, from a recreation standpoint, we're willing to propose trails within the woods, but we also have to think about safety, security, and bringing pedestrians, let's just say, across this particular drainage channel to the eastern side of the property, I would argue that that's a bad idea, and that if there were an emergency, if somebody were to get hurt on this side of the property, that it would be very difficult to get an emergency access.
So you just made my point. So do one of two things. Either ask for a rezoning and make it a PRD, because this is not a cluster development, or take out some of the houses and don't make them quarter acres so that you have bigger lots and you wouldn't have to worry about such steep embankments.
Understood.
You also show no overflow parking in this plan anywhere.
Can you just state your name for the record, please?
Sure. My name is Ryan Klausnitzer. I'm with NVR Ryan Homes, 1 Penn Center West, Pittsburgh, PA. Our intent tonight, I know Bill and Jeff did a nice job presenting. Our intent was to do a replication of what was done at Timber Run. Timber Run was done as a cluster development. If you look on the deeded acres, every lot is a quarter acre. You can look. And behind the lots, there's walking trails down over slopes and things exactly like Bill shows here. We intended to do the exact same type development that was done at Timber Run. It was very successful, and we would like to have the same quality homes and development here on this site.
Just for a point of clarification, I live in Timber Run.
Okay?
The majority of the lots in Timber Run are not quarter acres. I would wholeheartedly disagree with you on that, first of all.
Okay.
Second of all, if I were on the board at the point that Timber Run was approved, I would tell you that it is not a cluster development. Now, while I happen to be one of the lucky ones, and I do have wooded acreage behind my home, it is not owned by the HOA, nor is it anything that I could allow my children to freely play in, which is what I would assume you would want in a cluster development, which is the definition of the development. I don't know what to say, except for, I think, from my opinion, you need to go back and do one of the two things that I suggested to you, which is apply for a rezoning and come back as a PRD if it's approved as a rezoning, or make a true cluster development, because this is not a cluster development. Throwing in a trail because you couldn't use all the acreage and putting houses right on top of each other is not a cluster development. That's not the intent of the cluster development.
Okay. I think, to Bill's point, we followed the intent that was in the ordinance, and that's what other previous developments have been like. So that we just followed the same intent and the same things that have been done previously.
I would go back and check your information when you're saying that Timber Run is quarter acre lots, because I can tell you I do not own a quarter acre lot.
Okay. I just looked at a couple of them, but okay.
I'm not saying some of them aren't quarter acres, but the majority of them are not quarter acre lots.
Okay.
He did.
And I think someone on here is going to be the same situation. You're going to have lots that are larger than that. That's an average. It's going to be the same thing that you have at Timber Run. You're going to have lots that are bigger than that. You're going to have lots that are very wide and on the radiuses, and that's the nice thing of having the curvilinear roads in this plan. It's not linear by any means. It's very curvilinear. You're going to have nice lots. You're going to have nice separation as you go through the turns on these lots. It would very nice development.
I would
Dan.
also, when you're going back, I would also have a serious conversation and present to us what your impact fee is actually going to be. We shouldn't be telling you, you should, based on the facts that we've told you, which is there's a Miranda plan with 300-plus homes, Rising is in significant disrepair, Profio is in significant disrepair, there's a train trestle. I would encourage you to take that drive tonight when you leave here before it gets dark, that with very limited sight lines, Route 50, consider all those facts, because it's unfair for us to burden the existing taxpayers with those improvements because of your housing plan. So
Yeah, Ms. Fisher, I agree with you, and we've stated that not just here tonight, but at every presentation, that the Cecil Township does not have a traffic impact fee. A lot of municipalities do, and that's paid at building permit. There is not one in Cecil Township. We said that we are more than willing to participate and pay a traffic impact fee. It's hard to, without knowing exact costs, as Bill mentioned, and I know the traffic engineers were looking at some of that information, we're happy to do that. And if the township had one in place, we would be obviously obligated to pay that. But we are absolutely, and I think we need to work with the regardless if it's a PRD or it's a cluster development, we are willing to work with the township and the engineer that's performing the cost analysis to see what action needs done to help offset the costs and contribute to that.
Come back to us with a plan for it. When you come back with a plan for that. With an actual number. Work with our township engineer, an actual.
Agreed. And I think we can do that regardless if it's a cluster or if it's a PRD.
Agreed.
Dan? Yes, sir. I'm looking at this, and I can see a problem, same as they had at McConnell. Are we gonna make these entrances wider so they're not running in all the radiuses, breaking all sidewalks?
Sure, that's, I mean, we're not to that point of deciding that yet. I mean, they
No,
can.
but I mean, before they go and design, just so they know.
Sure. Yeah, with this wider radius.
When they bring them houses in on them tractor trailers, they break all the sidewalks up there. Every radius is broken.
So at this point, to be fair, there are residents in the audience that I believe wanted to speak. We have less than 6 minutes left before we have to move into our normal meeting. At this point, if the board's okay with it and the residents are okay with it, I think it makes sense to continue this hearing to another night so that we give you guys the opportunity to be heard with everything you want to say without feeling like you have to be rushed. Are you okay with that? Okay, is the board okay with that? Yeah. Okay, so we, at our 7 o'clock meeting, we will pick a time to reschedule or to continue this hearing. This hearing is by no means closed at this point, it's just continued. I'm sorry. Can you just come to the microphone and just state your name and address for the record? It's
Yeah, I'm just.
I'm Lynn Pape. I live at 194 King Road, and I wanted to make you aware that I have never received notification by mail from NVR or anyone. I have only heard because I've heard by word of mouth. So I have never received a certified letter or anything. I called them and told them I didn't receive a letter, and they were supposed to get back to me. They thought maybe they had gotten it returned. No one called me from NVR, and I've never gotten notification.
okay. We will schedule the continuance of this hearing at our 7 o'clock meeting. So if you either want to hang tight with us or call down to the township building tomorrow morning, we will make sure you know when the continued hearing is. Also, it's on, keep checking our township website because Jack does a good job of updating hearings and times and stuff on our township website. But if you just want to hang, I'll bump that to the front. We have a liquor license transfer, which shouldn't take more than 5 or so minutes, that we're going to do right at 7, and then I'll bump that resolution item up because we'll have to table it and then schedule the next hearing, or schedule the continuance of this hearing. Make sense? Okay. Everybody on board with that? Okay, so we're going to continue it at this point. And again, if you want to hang too for a few minutes, we'll do our liquor license transfer and then we'll schedule the continuance of this hearing.
Percent, the open space. Was it 50%?
I'm going to give everybody a 5-minute break because the liquor license was technically advertised as 7 PM, so I don't want to start prior to 7 PM. So we're going to take a 5-minute recess, and then at 7 PM, we'll do the liquor license transfer.
Open space provided, but is open space? Yeah. Yes, open and undisturbed. Maybe that guy could look at it first, I mean, to tell us that before he leaves. That's what I'm looking at. Could you get one of them to come up here for a second?
Yeah, hey,
Yeah, I
Bill.
know.
Hey, Bill.
Hi, Bill, I'm Tom. Hey, I just want to ask you, you're showing 50% open space, that acreage there, but the ordinance requires 50% that's undisturbed. This actually here is the undisturbed area. Is there actually 50% of that, or is there some of this included in that 50%?
Did have that.
I don't know why she harped on that. We require you to meet with him first, initially, just about the concept, the layout.
And it was asked that very question. And it was said to us that if I'm not arguing that we included this and that it doesn't necessarily say undeveloped.
Sure
But it's
does.
still, I'm
Okay,
saying
oh,
that-
I see, okay.
I'm saying, I know it says undisturbed. Ask that question and
All these HOAs. Yeah, they'll
back
schedule
into
that.
something that is natural in state versus
What's that? Yes, you're in.
that we could meet. And I can't argue with you otherwise, but
Does the grade not permit this looping through, connecting up?
no, I mean, we're
There might be some that are
elevation change.
by there.
Looks like it's cut this way and this way. Right. Oh, it's fill up?
Up to the site. This is a cut slope here.
Right.
This is a cut slope here. We're actually we're raising and actually
My first was born in August.
1280 right here, 1290 or 1300. So it's actually filling.
So could it be filled across the connector street?
My lot with the baby. Yeah.
Steep to be
12% max.
Okay. That's a great hospital.
70
In,
feet.
in 200.
Goes to the neighborhood.
Not even 5. That would be a 10%. We went back
What do you do?
several times.
Okay.
Feel comfortable.
See, I mean, even it talks about that. See, I was a part of writing this, and I understand how the R1. We like the idea of it being concentrated. Cindy was wrong on. We're okay with small parcels, but the intent was if there's still stated R1, at least if even lots like R2 size lots, the space would be usable and accessible to them, to their property. So where my son lives in North Carolina, what area behind, he can walk from his yard right into it. They don't, but I mean, they could. It's just.
On this
If
department,
you did it in R1, you'd still be the same thing.
it would be the same.
But you wouldn't be required to have the open space, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
That's the difference, though. But Dan, he says that it is included in that.
Okay.
it is, and I think we had that conversation.
Well, we knew we were going to encroach. I thought it was over into the buffer. That's what we were
Well, it's not an encroachment. I'm talking about all of the graded slopes are part of the open space.
I honestly missed it. Didn't see that either. I mean, I didn't